Okay, so continuing with the motorcycle European trip in 1971, like I said, we spent a couple weeks in England, just putting some miles on the motorcycle, just so they'd be all tested and everything. And then we took the ferry to France. We went to Paris, where we met uh, some friends of ours. You remember the charter stopped at Paris and at London. So we had one friend who was going to medical school there. So we visited him. And it turns out when I ran into a good friend of mine, this girl who'd been a real good friend, just friends. Her name's Emily. And when we were there, my friends were getting a little lethargic. They were just kind of wanting to just stay there and not do stuff. And Emily was going to Amsterdam to meet her sister. So on the spur of the moment, I said, I'm not sticking with these guys. They're like too passive. So I said, hey, Emily, I'll give you a ride to Amsterdam. So I split from the group. And she got in the back of the bike. We drove from Paris to Amsterdam. Yeah, her sister was there. They let me stay in their hotel room for a couple days, and then I went back to. I went up north to Sweden, and when I was in Sweden, I actually participated in a swimming meet in Örebro, and from there I went back, took the ferry, and went back to England. I wanted, because there were things I wanted to do. I stayed another week in England, and then I went back to France, not to Paris this time. I remember I took the ferry, got to France, and drove through across all of France in one day. I always remember because at that time, you're driving the motorcycle every day. You just get used to higher and higher and higher speeds, like the guys who race. So I was going easily 100 miles an hour all over the place. And I remember I made a turn into this really small village, and it was like super surprised, and I was going super fast. And by the time I downshifted, the noise just reverberated through all the walls of the buildings, and I was past the town in like 30 seconds. Left all that noise behind me. And I don't even know if the police chased me or not, but it was just, it happened. And I ended up in Biarritz, where there was a big surfing town in southern France. I always remember there was a church there, Saint Jean de Luz, where I think one of the Louis guys had built a church there or got married or something. So the next day I continued. I was going on my way to Madrid, but I wanted to go through Basque Country because that's where my mom's family originally was from 200 years ago. So I went through all that, beautiful country, all these huge boulders and forests and so on, and ended up in Madrid. In Madrid, I ran into some friends from high school who were going to college there. So we spent a couple days. And then Manuel, my Mexican roommate, showed up. The other two guys were going to France, and neither had a girlfriend in France, who had a house in France. So Manuel and myself and my friend Carlos from Venezuela, we took off and went to Valencia. And in Valencia, we took the ferry to go to Mallorca. When we got to Mallorca, we stayed at this small pension. I always remember because it was across the most expensive hotel in Mallorca. And one day we see the flags from Venezuela there. And it turned out the ex-dictator who had to flee the country about 11 years before, was living a rich life in Spain, was there. So we walked over and introduced ourselves, just like that. And he actually said, oh, I'll invite you to have some tea this afternoon. So we sat there and had fun, talked to the guy who had been running the country and then had to leave. And ironically, a dictator's a dictator, but all the stuff he did is still there. The hotels, the highways, and the democracy hasn't been able to improve on that. If anything, they've made it worse. So we were in Mallorca for like a couple of weeks. it was fun. Every day I'd go around and do a tour of the island. I went to the north part where Chopin used to live, Chopin, and I had a lot of fun. Beautiful beaches, and met a lot of people there. Went to a swimming meet. I participated in a swimming meet there also. And then I met a guy from Venezuela there. We call him El Indio, the Indian. He was an anthropologist. He had lived with the Yanomami in the Amazon jungle for 6 months and had a lot of stories about them. And when we're about to leave, he said, "Oh, I'm going to Sweden to visit my girlfriend." So he said, "How are you going to get there?" He says, "I haven't decided." I said, "I'll give you a ride." And so he said, "Oh, okay, sure." So we went, took the ferry back to Valencia, where Manuel was with us, and Carlos took the train back to Madrid to go back to school. So we went on the 2 motorcycles, and we got to southern France. I remember going through that region where the white horses gallop wildly in the ocean and the beaches. And we ended up in this southern town. I went to Saint-Tropez. I have a picture of that. We wanted to see one of the famous French actresses, rumored to be there. You know, crazy stuff.
Which one?
Brigitte Bardot. And I still have the picture. I think you've seen the picture of me in front of Saint-Tropez on a motorcycle. And then from there we went to see Emilio in southern France. He was staying with his girlfriend and her mom at this villa they had. So when we got there, Manuel decided to stay. And so El Indio and me, we kept going. We went to Italy. I wanted to go back to Milan, where I had been when I was in 6th grade. It was really a nice experience. I saw the church where I did my first communion. I saw the pastries where my grandmother used to take me to celebrate. And then we went north through Switzerland, crossed the Alps, went into Austria, and reached the German border, and went into East Germany. It was funny because this is the time of the Iron Curtain, but I had a Venezuelan passport and an American passport. So here I was when we crossed because I had the Venezuelan passport, and here we are going through the roads with an Easy Rider USA flag helmet through communist East Germany. And we reached the little town of Hof, where we stayed at this school. I guess it was summer, so it was like a bed and breakfast, a hostel. And I made it to Czechoslovakia. Wanted to see where my dad's family was from. And then we headed back to East Germany. Up north, I went to Berlin. This is the time when Berlin was totally communist. And when we left Berlin, we went north. We were going to Sweden, and we got stopped, and the military said, "You can't keep going on this road because it's forbidden. So next turn, you got to turn into some other road." We were going so fast that we missed it. And then when we made a turn, there was tanks and military waiting for us on the road. So we had to finally swerve and go the way they wanted us to. I'm 19 and El Indio was probably 22 or something. We weren't, too political. But we ended up having to go through the Black Forest at night, pretty scary and cold. This is in the summer, right? And we ended up in this place trying to see where to sleep. And I parked the motorcycle on the curb, and some guys came out of this bar, and they were making gestures, and we thought they were complaining that we parked there. And no, the guy just wanted me to give him a ride to this little town a couple miles back. So, and El Indio waited. So I go there. The guy takes me. It's his home. He shows me the picture of his family. He says they're on vacation. So he said we could sleep there in his home. So I went back, picked El Indio up, and we slept there. Next morning, turns out he was a sergeant in the East German Army, and he told us not to tell anybody where we'd been. He'd get into trouble. So that was an experience, and nice people everywhere. So that day we ended up in the Northern Sea. just the northern part of Germany, a town called Rostov, where we were going to take the ferry, and the police did ask us, said, "Where did you sleep last night?" We said, "Oh, we enjoyed your wonderful Black Forest." So we never said anything. So the ferry took us to Denmark. When we got to Denmark, we went to Copenhagen. I wanted to see the Little Mermaid in the port, and we were staying at this huge tent. It was like a hippie place, like a hostel, but it was just a huge tent. And I remember when we got there, there was this guy who was acting like the boss of the place, some guy, I think he was Turkish or something like that. People there are very peaceful. Nobody fights or anything. So he tried to get us to, pay him or whatever. El Indio turns to me in Spanish and says, "You think we should beat the crap out of this guy?" And when the guy heard us speak Spanish, he got all scared. Because he thought we were just some pacifist, European guys. When he knew we were South American, he got really scared. So from that moment on, he left us alone. So we spent the night there. We took the ferry. We went to where the ferry. I forget where the ferry took us. Southern Sweden for sure. I forget the name. Malmo maybe. And we went up. And I always remember we went to this little town called Emmaboda, and that's where El Indio's girlfriend was. She was part of this bunch of musicians, Swedish musicians, and they were all going to this concert in the northern part of Sweden. And so I left my motorcycle there, and we took this bus, like a big school bus full of Swedish musicians, me and El Indio, and we went to this concert. It was fun. I remember it was 2 a.m. and it was still light. So once I did that, then my first time in Sweden, when I went there, I crossed the Arctic Circle. I went to Kiruna, which was like the most northern city in Sweden, just to check it out, just north of the Arctic Circle. I remember doing that. This time, once I left El Indio, I was running out of time. So I went to the west of Sweden. I picked up the ferry there, and you won't believe it, but I remember reaching this ferry was going to stop in Oslo and then keep going to London, and that was the end of our trip. And I always remember because I was so tired, so tired, that they gave me my cabin, and I went there, and I saw that there was other people assigned to the cabin. I didn't know who or anything. And I got into the bed, and I think I slept the whole 30 hours from there. And when I wake up, it was these 2 beautiful girls were my cabin mates. But it was just funny. They must have thought this guy is dead to the world. But during the whole trip, one of the interesting things was every time I had to get a ferry, it was always, I had to get first class tickets because that's how I could get the motorcycle on the ferry. That was probably the only money I spent all. Oh, and when we were in southern France, I forgot about this. I wanted to go to Monaco to see the Monte Carlo Casino. And I had bought these suede suits. I left some in London, but I had a black one. And because that one, if it gets wrinkled, you just put it where there's steam and they get unwrinkled. So I put on my suede tuxedo to go to the casino in Monte Carlo. And I remember I was waiting for the place to open, and there's this flower bed in front, roses. And I was so sleepy, I fell asleep there while, with a tuxedo waiting for the casino to open. So that was another experience. So it was a lot of fun. I mean,
I wish there was a picture of that.
Yeah, well, I used to have pictures, but I don't know. When the fire of the house, I had them all in slides, so it may still be somewhere, but I'll look in boxes
but
to
not
see.
That one, the tuxedo and the flower bed.
I don't know. That's a memory. Yeah, I remember that. Other than that, yeah.
Was the car race going on in Monaco or no?
No, this was August, so the car race is in May. But then when I got to London, I ran into Manuel and Emilio and Mario. Mario had kind of gone off with some young people, but I asked them, so what'd you guys do all summer? And they said, well, we were in France, we went to Italy, and Spain. Obviously, that's where I saw Manuel, and that was it. And they said, "Where you been?" And I said, "Everywhere except I got to the border of. I went to Finland. I got to the border of Russia, with El Indio, but we wanted to go to Russia to St. Petersburg, but they said it was 2 weeks to get the visa, and we didn't have the time." When I was in Mallorca, we took a trip even to Morocco with some Swedish guys. And I think they went there to buy hashish, and we didn't know that, but we didn't have any, so it was no big deal. This was when the dictator Franco was in charge of Spain, so it was. They saw you kissing a girl in the street, you got fined $1. So police, everybody, man had to wear suits all day outside in the street. It was really a real tough dictatorship, but we were like oblivious to all that. So I guess that was the trip. So we got back to New York.
Anything in Czechoslovakia interesting?
Just pretty. No, it was a quick through and through. Mm-hmm. We were already in a hurry to get up there. So the trip was over. We get back to New York, and that's when I start grad school in math. So for me, it was perfect because I had finished one grad school and I was starting a new one at the Courant Institute. And I remember
How old
that
were you?
19. Mm-hmm. And I remember starting that first semester. My scholarship was running out that term, so I knew I had to go home to get another one. So that term was interesting because I was living in the Bronx, and the school, I stayed at Eric's place for a while. He was doing better with the radiation treatment, and I think he was in remission by then. And I had to commute all the way, I'd take the subway, go to class in Washington Square Park. So there was these two Venezuelan friends who were doing an insurance training class. And they said, "Hey, you can stay with us, just sleep in the couch." And it was only for that semester. So I think I did September, October at Eric's place, and then November, December at their place. Took my finals, and then asked for a semester off. And I went back to Venezuela to get more money. And when I was there, I got a job at the university. They hired me as a professor. And so it was interesting because I said, "Hey, I have a master's and a bachelor's in electrical engineering from NYU." And they said, "Oh yeah, but here to be an engineer here, you'd have to take like so many courses because it's Venezuela and we're better than anybody in the world and whatever." So I said, "There's no way I'm going to redo what I've done." And here's the irony of it. They said, "Well, you cannot be an engineer here, but you can be a professor of our future engineers." So, it's one of those things where you say, where are they coming from? I mean, but I had already had to do this in 6th grade and 10th grade. Every time I came back from going to school somewhere else, they would want me to take exams just to be, par with them. It was always just bureaucracy all the way. So I just said, "Yeah, I'll be your professor." So I taught that semester at the Central University. I also taught at the Catholic University. That was interesting because I remember showing up the first day for class, and some of my high school buddies were my students now. Because while I was going to school at NYU, they were having suspension of classes and revolts and this and that. So I had done my master's and they were still in 2nd year of college. So they were my students in 4th semester of math. And so that was interesting. And it was an experience. I remember I had big classes at the university, and most of the students were my age or older. And at that time, the government said anybody can go to engineering school, no entrance exam. So all of a sudden, we had classes with 150 people where 140 didn't belong. And I remember I did it. My first exam, I made an exam that was, straightforward. And one of my colleagues said, no, don't do that, because if you just make an easier exam, the people who are going to get an A are still going to get an A, and the others, they won't be able to complain. So I did that, and still 140 out of 150 failed the exam. And then they wanted to, it was funny, they put the, because in those days I would, I was friends with some people from the society, and we'd show up on the papers and the society pages and so on. So the students would put on red paint on the walls, Kadala, you're part of the bourgeoisie. You're part of the bourgeoisie. You're against the proletariat, because everybody was communist in the university. And when they saw I was getting how old was I? I was 19, 20. I just turned 20. I was getting a kick out of all this attention. They actually cleaned the walls. They painted over them. So that was a cool experience. I had a lot of fun. I had brought my motorcycle from the trip, so that's what I used when I was there that semester. I bought a used car too, but I would go out and met some really cool people, and we'd hang around, we'd surf. And that went on till the summer. That summer, my brother came from Houston, and so that was probably the one time we spent together in our lives. We had a couple of months that we spent together.
Which
surfing.
brother? Which brother?
John. Surfing. He was 3 years younger than me. I was 20, so he was 17. So one of the professors I met during this time recommended me to the National Institute of Investigation, and they funded the rest of my graduate school in math. Actually better than the previous scholarship. Ironically, the oil company had funded me for my first 4 years, including the master's. So and that's where my dad and 3 of my uncles worked. So I said I should go, before I got that job at the university, I should go offer my services. And some idiot in HR put me to sleep. I actually fell asleep during the interview. The guy was such a bore. And I said, it doesn't seem that these guys, after paying my school for 4 years, aren't even interested. So that's when I remember leaving the place. I said, well, I gave him the first option. I left the place. I literally crossed the railroad tracks, went to the university and got my job there. And then the rest is history. That was my first, out of 52 years of teaching at the university, that was my first experience.
That was very grateful of you to have done that first.
Well, I told my dad, and he asked me the name of the guy, and he said, yeah, no wonder. So he knew, they all knew the guy.
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be, and thanks. And then, so I went back to New York. I had money now. I moved near Washington Square. Eric moved with me because NYU had sold the Bronx campus where the engineering was. It was a beautiful campus. It had a library that was amazing. It had some trees that even Einstein had planted. It had a Hall of Famous Americans. It was a beautiful, beautiful campus, and they sold it to the city. It became the Bronx Community College. And so Eric's engineering school moved to Brooklyn. So we moved downtown. We had an apartment there, and it's cool. It was 65 Downing Street. So we had a kick of that. It was a mafia street. There were a bunch of warehouses, so they had mafia meetings every day, every night. You could see all the Cadillacs, the limousines. The cops never went, so I could park my car anywhere on the street, and I never got a ticket. So, it was cool. And so I started my life there in the Courant. Spend what, 2-3 years there. Finished my master's. Passed the quals for the PhD. It was very competitive. I remember some older guys who had been professors in their countries. I was scared of them because it was a competitive qual. And then I got an A and they got a B, and it was their 4th time taking it. And I remember asking my advisor, I thought these guys, he says, yeah, they have too many bad habits. Once you start teaching, it's really hard to get you to think the way we want you. And you are a product of NYU, so you're thinking the way we want. So that was cool. So I did all that, and then when I in November of '73, my little brother died in an accident, one of these stupid accidents that happened. And so my family fell apart, and that put a lot of pressure on me. So when the summer came in '74, I started doing research for my thesis, but I went home. And when I went home, I had a girlfriend, Bea, and went back to the university, was living at home. I started teaching. I bought a place of an apartment, a really nice apartment. And it was cool because the university never paid me for 6 months. So when they finally paid me, that money was enough for the down payment to the apartment. So here I had this really beautiful apartment, marble floors, a really nice finish, everything. So I started moving there, and then in March we got married. And then it was just working at the university. I was working at 2 universities. Because once I started working full-time again at the Central University, the National University, some of the friends I had there opened the doors for me to work at other smaller universities. So I did that. And then I was, what else was I doing? I was still swimming, I was playing polo, doing some karate, because I did Taekwondo at NYU. I was 6 months short of getting my black belt when I left. Yeah, because the idea was to come back in '74, but then when I got home, everything was just shattered, so I just decided to stay. If I would have gone back 1 more year, maybe 2, I would have finished my PhD, then, written my thesis. Instead of that, I was teaching graduate courses at the Central University and taking graduate courses to do a doctorate there. And I also went to law school, started going to law school. So I was pretty busy. Let's see. So that was '75. So in '75, Dali, you were born.
Mm-hmm.
And then, life changes then. In those, first I tried working my research for him, but there was no internet. And by mail, that would have taken forever. So I ended up doing a doctorate in Venezuela, probably 60% of what I would have done at NYU. It was more of I don't know, just a research thing. And then, but it was still problems all over because when I finished that, there was a problem with the degree. They wouldn't give me the degree because I was missing 2 required courses. The required courses were Methods of Applied Mathematics 1 and 2. So every year I would request that they would give me credit for those. And I didn't have any political clout, so it would end up in the bottom of the pile, and every year they would say, oh, we didn't get to it, we have to wait till next year. Why was I doing this? Because those required courses, I was the only one teaching them. So how could I register as my own student? So I could not get the degree because I was missing the 2 courses for which I was the professor. So, again, Venezuelan bureaucracy, right? And actually, I left Venezuela in '84, and a friend of mine in '87 kind of reached out and said, I think your petition got approved. So somewhere in some file cabinet, in some office in the University of Venezuela, there's my doctorate in theoretical mechanics, in applied math, call it applied math. Anyway, who cares? So I remember because let's see. So I my agreement with the people that gave me the scholarship was that for every year they paid, I had to teach 2 years, and I think I'm one of the few people that honored that. So I taught 5 years. And in that meantime, I finished law school, and that was another funny thing because I finished law school. When I had registered, I had shown my degrees, and the school had accepted me. It was a private university. But then when it came to getting the degree, the Department of Education says, oh, we cannot give you the degree. Why not? Because you don't have a high school diploma. So here I am with 4 years of graduate math, a master's in double E, a master's in math, all the work done for the PhD. Finished the law degree, but I don't have a high school diploma. So again, you know, this was just, it was one thing after another. So I said, well, you know what you can do with that degree. And it was around this time when I was flying. I had joined the airline.
Okay, stop for a second.